So I'm not sure how long everybody's been beekeeping, but I've only been beekeeping 5 years, which is just enough time to have lots of questions, ask a few questions, and have 4 billion answers. So like most people, I get my information from the club, from friends in the club, or I go online, like a lot of people do. And when I first started beekeeping, the only way I learned about feeding was through George. And I watched George do his processes. I'm like, wow, that seems really hard. I'm going to go online and I'm going to see if there's an easier way to do this. So the first thing I'm going to show you is, and I can show you and actually do it, but it'll be easier just to explain it, is making the candy bricks. So yeah, here we go. So I just take white sugar. I put it, and what I have learned from a lot of beekeepers is there is a not exact science. You don't have to measure things. You just got to get it to work. So I'll use sugar in a bowl. I'll put just enough hot water in there and I'll mix it up. And then I'll take a pan bigger than that. I'll use some parchment paper. I'll line it. I'll pour it in. And I've got 2 ways of letting it set. As a photographer, I've got hot lights. Sometimes I'll just put them out the trays and I'll stick some hot lights over, which really heat up. And I just let them sit under the hot lights. Or I can put it in the oven, turn it on for like 10 or 15 minutes. It kind of melts it. And then when I turn off the oven and just let it sit, it hardens up and it turns into what I call our candy bricks. I like these because I can just put in what I need. This is all left over from last year. So I just break it up. When I have them setting in the pan, I'll take a pizza cutter and I'll score it so that I can actually break it into different chunks. I'll get a big bin of it and I'll just put the chunks in the top. What I use to use shivs that I made. And then during one of our, what do we call it when we sell stuff, the used stuff? Auctions, thank you. During one of our auctions, I picked this thing up. And I used my boards over the inner cover. And then I used this over the hive, which is the screen, and the inner cover over it. And every time I came out, pulled up actually, I didn't need an inner cover. I just put the lid right over this because the bees can't get through it. And I was able to check it. I just put all the sugar over this. What was really cool about this was that they can access it from any angle. When I used this over the top of my hive on top of an inner cover, they had to come up through that little opening in the middle. And somebody says, well, the bees don't really move around that much and it's kind of hard for them to access it. I noticed there were bees all over the bottom of this eating the sugar, whereas this, not as much. So last year, Leela and I got together and I took a bunch of my, I guess what are the shallows? I took a bunch of my shallows and I added stream to the bottom of it. And that's what I'm using now. I don't have them with me because they're being used right now. So I only have this. So what I did was I brought one of my leftover shims. And I'm just showing you that it doesn't matter what size box you have. You can kind of create any size box, which is awesome. And I'll use that to feed the candy bricks. You guys don't need to see me make one, right? You can kind of guess. All right. The other thing is liquid feed. I know everybody, George is saying 2 to 1. I went online. Does anybody know who David Burns is? I'm sure you guys have seen David Burns. Yeah, he says 1 to 1. He says 1 to 1. Honeybee Healthy, 1 teaspoon. Honeybee Healthy Amino Bee Booster, 1 teaspoon. And this is just a powder, a protein powder, 1 teaspoon for 32 ounces of water. So I made this up. It looks like lemonade. It's in a lemonade container. Don't drink it. It's not lemonade. But I made up about 3 containers of this yesterday. I filled up 3 of these. And as you can see, they fit nicely in my box. I put this right on top of my hive. Now, I'm kind of lazy and cheap, so I don't really have all the jars and the little fancy things. So I take these containers, and I literally put a big cloth over the top. I put the lid back on. I hope I did this right. And I'm going to, if anybody wants to come up and look, as you can see, it's dry right now. I literally flip it over in the top of the hive, and the water starts to seep out. then this whole thing gets nice and saturated, but not too much. And when I put it in, there's no bees on it. After I go to the next hive and I come back and that's all saturated, the bees will all come up. So I'm putting the screen over it this way, so the bees can access it from the bottom and from the top. And they suck that thing dry. I've done it a couple times and they seem to suck it dry. The only thing I haven't done was use the pollen. So I'm not really sure how the pollen is going to work with the cloth, but I like to experiment and try things. But I'm going to put this on the floor so you guys can watch this. It will seep out and it will eventually saturate. This is just water. This is just water. So, and then a couple of things I wanted to tell you was that you guys know what these things are, right? So they're paint mixers. So if you guys are doing big giant buckets, you have like 100 hives and you want to get your drill and use this in a bucket with the sugar water, these work really great. They make them in 5-gallon ones and 1-gallon ones. Does anybody have any questions? Kind of the lowest I can get it. I don't know, like 150, 200, whatever everything I have has like a different setting. That's why I like the hot lights, because it's just for like a really low heat that I can let go for a long time. I don't know if having it too high messes up anything. 20 minutes, 10 minutes, just to heat it and kind of like kind of melt it. And then when it gets cold again, it actually hardens up nicely. And I like these because, like I said, these are from last year. With George's, I don't know what, I would love to hear when he does this, what he does if the bees don't consume it all, what he does with the candy board, because with this, I just take them out, put them in a container and save them for the following year. So you guys just leave them on there until they consume the whole thing.
I'll show you in my 2 minutes.
Okay. All right, let me get out of running.
But I got 3 minutes to ask to do something else. So as most of you are aware, Donna presented 2 ways to feed, liquid and solid, right? Liquid feed is basically what you want to do now. Solid feed is what we call emergency feed. You know, that's the feed you're adding to the hive pretty much after November when it's too cold to feed liquid. So right now, we should all be, if our hives are light, feed them liquid. 1-to-1, 2-to-1. I'm not going to waste my time arguing. I only have 2 minutes. They're both probably okay right now, but the later you go on in the season, you probably want 2-to-1. So we do candy boards every year. Last year was a little bit of a mess because our candy boards didn't set up because I think Walmart sugar is not sugar. I'm not sure what it is anymore, but because I've been doing this too long to think it's me. So candy boards is just another way to do emergency feed, right? It's basically where you basically mix sugar, water, a little vinegar, heat it up to 238 degrees, and then pour it. And it hardens like a candy brick. So basically, it's really simple to do. You take an inner cover, whatever 5, 10, 8 frame inner cover, right? And you basically find a shim, or you make a shim that's about 1.5 inches wide. You can either screw it or tape it. You want to make sure it's pretty well attached so it doesn't leak out and you get candy board, outside the candy board. And basically, you cover the hole with a piece of lunch bag and some tape, and you basically just pour the hot sugar water into this, and it sets over an hour or 2. And then so you have this 15-pound block of basically hard candy that you basically invert over the top of the hive. So at the top of the hive, you put this big chunk. It's pretty much, supersized candy bricks, basically, on top of your hive. And then the bees, as they move up in the winter, and when they get to the top of the hive and there's no more food left in the top of the hive, now they have the candy to eat. It also helps with a little bit of moisture too, because the moisture that the bees generate will go into the candy board and soften the candy board and let the bees eat it. The other thing you can do is and again, usually we recommend putting your emergency feed on your hive after the oxalic acid dribble in December. Your bees should not need solid food now, but once you dribble and you're kind of getting things all set up for the winter, you can put it on then, or you could wait until January or February to put it on, but it's not something you put on now. So you put it on the top of your hive, you insulate the top, and you're pretty much set. That's 15 pounds in 1.5 inches shim. So every month I'll go in and kind of just, you can check. Again, the nice thing about what Donna was showing was the screen. You don't have to open it up. You can just pop the lid and look through the screen. On the candy boards, you need to open it up. The other thing about the candy boards, it's a good and a bad thing. Someone taught me something. I do listen. I didn't look up to see who laughed, you know, but I got you. What you can do actually, which is pretty cool. It's like people like, yeah, the one disadvantage of candy boards is if you leave them on too long, what happens? The bees will build comb, right? And then the queen will lay in that, right? But you know what you can do with that? You wait until it hatches out, and then they fill it with spring honey, and then you do chunk honey. So you take that comb that they built up there, wait until it's filled with honey, and then you cut it out, throw it in jars, and you use that. So anyway, the other thing you can do about the extra is at the end of the season when you're and there's still extra board in here, like Tony said, you cut out the piece of paper that's here, and you just flip it over like this. So this sits at the top of your hive now. So there's some extra food up top here if they need to come up, or you can just refill. I mean, you could just next year you just take the board, stack them up. If there's some left in here, you just pour on top of it and you refill it. The challenge with candy boards is it requires a heat source. You know, it requires working with very hot 238-degree sugar syrup, so your chance of burning. And if you use Walmart sugar, it may not set up. So this year, I'm telling you how I see it. That is so cool, by the way. Look at that thing. I mean, Donna, that's very cool. That may be the newest way to feed your bees. But questions on candy boards. We usually do it the Saturday before Thanksgiving in my barn. I plan on doing it again. No one may show up after last year's debacle, but we will do it again. Tony brings the wine, so if you enjoyed the wine, it's another opportunity to get raspberry wine. Instructions will come out. You basically bring an inner cover. If you have a shim, great. If you don't, we make shims and some sugar, and we'll pour you a candy board. This is great for someone who has 2 or 3 hives and just wants to be one and done with it, and we'll make candy board. Anyway, questions? Yes, Regina.
I can change my candy board. So essentially, I take sugar and just mix a little bit of water. And it's not red, but a little bit of vinegar. And then you put it around, and it'll evaporate.
And it's solid, and you invert it on the hive too. And are you basically putting it into the same kind of thing and inverting it? On it? Okay. But you don't get to drink Tony's wine. All perspective. It all looks at the end of the day. Yeah. So, any other questions about candy boards or emergency feeding? Bring sugar. Bring sugar. Yeah, it'll come out. It's really a fun time. Yes. So there's emergency feed, like all this solid feed is basically only used if the bees need it, right? So if the bees have foraged enough honey and you've harvested, you've let enough honey be and you fed them liquid, if they need it, you may not need any of this emergency feed at the end of the day.
December that you need it, or are you deciding in the fall that you're going to get?
I think it depends on going into the fall. You kind of know what the weights are of your hives. If your hive's really heavy, basically, I don't want to take up too much time, but I will. Every month, like December, January, February, I make a round on my hive, and I basically pick it up. And if it's light, it gets emergency feed. If it's not light, I just let them go with whatever's on the hive. So that's kind of my way of doing it. Now, some people after the dribble, they put emergency feed on all their hives, just get it started, and then they don't have to worry every month to go out there and check the weights of their hives. But I kind of know you kind of know 5 pounds a day. You kind of know what they're going to consume, and you kind of just go from there.
George, can I ask you a question? This is kind of an extension of Charles. If you put on sugar and they have honey, will they choose the honey over the sugar? Not always. I was gonna say because if it won't hurt to put it on there anyway, why not?
Yeah, if you're feeding sugar water, right?
No, the hard stuff.
Right, but you want them to use up all the stuff on the frames first. In my mind, like that's why I go. Right, only, to me, I only put the emergency feed on the top when they are running out, because I want them to consume whatever's on the stick. Yeah, Chris, bring some sanity to it.
I think that they're storing that sugar at all, you put the emergency feed on top, so it really doesn't matter. The win-win here is that if you put sugar blocks on there, and they decide they like the sugar better, come spring, you're gonna have, if you don't use Aprovar, okay, and you use oxalic or something that, or formic or whatever, and you didn't do anything where it's gonna taint the honey, you can take that honey off when the spring nectar comes in, and you'll have fall honey in the spring.
Assuming you didn't feed sugar water.
Hmm?
Assuming you didn't feed them sugar
That's
water.
if you feed sugar. That's if only if you stick the candy board, or I call them sugar cubes. That's how you make it. They're like sugar cubes, but you make a slushy around the sugar and then it solidifies. Yeah.
What if I'm feeding the sugar water now, but?
If you're feeding sugar water now, I don't know about that. It is not. Then it's not honey. That's the one thing about it.
So we said, if you eat nothing but McDonald's day in and day out, your piece of it, really, having it for both going, it's not going to be so different variety. Some are going to eat the sugar, some are going to eat the honey, but it's the, they got variety.
So it's like McDonald's and Wendy's in the hive together, huh?
But you kind of know right now which hives are light and which hives are going to need some help to get through winter. You know, I mean, bees die 2 reasons through winter. One is disease. Those hives usually die before January 1st. And then the other reason why colonies die is starvation. And those colonies die after January 1st. You know, so you kind of know which ones are light, right? Yeah, no, I mean, we're going to talk more about feeding at our December party. But anyway, we're good, Donna?
Does
Keep it rolling.
anybody have questions about feeding? Everybody, there's not really newbies here.